over 50, but I was hoping for something like this. So thank you so much. Welcome. I am Kimber McAfee, the Executive Director of Alpine Watershed Group. And our main event this evening is having Dan Malman present on the West Fork Carson Prioritization Project. But I wanted to say just a few words about how we got to this point. And then I also want to do introductions. One of the things the Watershed Group does is bring people together. And so I think it's really important, not only for Dan to know who's in the room and who's sharing ideas and thoughts, but also for all of you to know who's in the room and how we can all work together, partner, and get projects done. So this project really goes back to before my time, but in 2018, when I started at the Watershed Group, I heard there was going to be a vision plan for the West Fork Carson River watershed. And at the time, it was a novel way to address water quality impairments, but it hadn't been done before. So the regional board, Lahontan Regional Water Quality Control Board, was going through this process, but figuring it out. And so between 2020 and 2022, the Watershed Group helped the regional board host a series of community meetings. And I know some of you were at those. Unfortunately, the community meetings started when COVID did. So we had some virtual meetings. We met about roads, recreation, restoration, and then the series ended in person here with a forum on ranching. And so as Danny McClure took the helm at the regional board on the vision plan, we started to realize that there were going to be some details of the vision plan that needed more study, data, exploration to really define projects. And so that's when the West Fork Carson Prioritization Project kind of started to come into being. Because there was a vision plan, we became eligible for the first time to apply for State Water Board non-point source program funding. And that's funding from the State Water Board, but it's getting Environmental Protection Agency funding behind it. So the watershed coordinators, Headwaters coordinator Rachel Maurer applied for that funding in late 2022. It's a pretty long process. We were awarded the funding. And then because it's state and federal funding, we had to do a public bid. So we went through the process. I had support from Alpine Watershed Group board members, also Ed James and Brenda Hunt were on the committee that accepted the proposals, reviewed the proposals, conducted interviews. And through that process, we are working with Waterways Consulting and Dan Malman specifically. We are very, very grateful that Carson Water Subconservancy District was able to provide the 25% match. That's the required match for a non-point source program grant. We could not have accepted the funding without that match. So there's the whole vision plan led to this, but there's also Brenda Hunt with Carson Water Subconservancy District's vision that there needed to be a geomorphological assessment of the entire Carson River watershed. And so when this funding opportunity came up, we thought, let's start at the headwaters at just one of the sub-watersheds, and that will help leverage funding for the other East Fork Carson sub-watershed, and then also hopefully for downstream in Nevada. I think that's all I wanted to say before we do introductions. Are there any questions about anything leading up to us having a West Fork Carson prioritization project? Okay, so bear with me. I would like you to say your name and your affiliation. Your affiliation could be agency, it could be community member, it could be both. And we're dealing with Clint Celiotech, so this little octopus is going to come around, and that way the people on Zoom.
It's got an extension cord.
It's going to come starting here because Alpine Watershed Group has a new staff member, team member. We have new help. I won't say her name or position because that's for her to say and give the example of title and affiliation, but she'll be with us part-time and we're super happy to have more help.
Hi, my name is Kelsey Brown. I am the new Watershed Project Coordinator at Alpine Watershed Group.
I'm Dan Malman. I am a geomorphologist and project manager with Waterways Consulting Inc.
I'm Ed Kleiner. I don't want you to worry. Comstock Seed no longer exists. We were bought out by a consortium. The Comstock Farm does exist. I still exist. And we're still in business to keep the watershed healthy. I have a farm, 43 acres in Gardnerville, so I'm concerned about the watershed. Thank you.
Okay, hold your applause. If this is a test, is this thing doing anything? Yeah, it's just.
For the Zoom world, it does something.
Oh, it does. Apologies to the.
Thanks,
world. And the hydrologist for the Carson River District.
Hello, I'm Megan Walsh. I work at Lamont and Water Board. There's a few of us here, so I'll just state my kind of what I work on is permitting. And I am the humble Toyabe liaison, so I also listen to them a lot, so that's why I'm.
Hi, everyone. My name is Helen Kurtz. I'm Headwaters Coordinator with Alpine Watershed Group. I feel like I'm pro-loaded, I'm a rubber, waterfall field.
And former Alpine Watershed Group staff.
Danny McClure, I'm with the water board and then lead on the sport question machine plan.
Brenda Hunt, I'm the Watershed Program Manager with the Carson Watershed Consulting Inc.
Ed James, General Manager of Carson Water Conservancy District, and a short timer.
My name is Chris Stanley of South Tahoe PUD, and just recently, about 6 months, a year ago, I took over managed County. Don Miller, Alpine Office.
Chris Harvey, Alpine Watershed Group.
Mary Young, Alpine Watershed Group. Goldberg, I am a geologist with Carson City, Gila.
Same booth, I have a community development.
Perfect timing for good.
But Celio, I guess Celio Tech, apparently. And Alpine found those records.
My name is Rick Weaver. I'm a flight controller. I see the flight. You can still, I should say, we, have a recreational use. Dan Capper, Board of Directors of the Alpine Watershed Group, and one of the board of the high school like. Richard Group, retired from the Hot Water Board and Alpine Watershed Group volunteer. Non Jordan, retired. I'll also choose these different flags. Flags that were the chair. I say, just about for their organization. Thanks for attending.
Neil, you're up.
I'm Louis Langlois, I'm just a unit member resident.
And what was your last name?
Langlois.
Louis Langlois. And Neil?
Neil Mortimer, I'm the Forest Health Coordinator with the Alpine Watershed Group. It's a pleasure to have everybody here tonight. If for some reason you inadvertently did not sign in, I would appreciate it and catch up on that. Thank you.
Yes, Dan.
It's been a request for the people that are on Zoom to introduce themselves.
Yes, that was
We were-
next on our list. Thank you. And thank you all for humoring me. And if you don't like Prince Tech, you can make a significant donation and we can make it better.
If everyone on Zoom would like to introduce themselves, we can start with Carol.
Sorry, hi everyone, Carol B. in Wildcape Engineering, just interested to learn what you're doing on the West Fork.
How about Sarah next?
Hey everyone, Sarah Hecox. I'm an associate director with American Rivers, and I support some of the meadow restoration work that we do in the Carson.
Thank you. And now Carl, if you could go ahead. Carl, I think you might be muted, so let's go to Marina.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can see me. I'm Marina Lovejoy with Carson City Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Department.
Mike Brown, if you'd like to go.
Good evening, Mike Brown, community member.
Thank you. Mike Kellogg.
Hi, good evening. This is Mike Kellogg with J.E. Fuller Hydrology and Geomorphology. I'm a geomorphologist and I work a lot in the Carson River watershed. So I'm just interested in this project.
Thank you, Mike. Lauren.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I have very limited internet here, so no video. Lauren Roach with Watershed Resiliency Consulting. I am a sub-consultant to Waterways on this project. And sorry I couldn't join in person, but I'm out of town.
Thank you, Lauren. Ben Ewing.
Ben Ewing, California Fish and Wildlife, fisheries biologist for Alpine County.
And then Carl, if you're there and you'd like to introduce yourself, please feel free to do so. You're unmuted now, but I still can't hear anything.
So the final person is Carl Rushmeyer, who is also an Alpine Watershed. Thank you. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dan Bauman. And Dan will say this as well, but please, if you have questions, ask as he goes along. There'll be time for questions at the end. But Dan really wanted this to be a little bit informal and you know, I kind of urged for it to be like we normally have it set up, but please ask questions as he goes. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Is this working on Zoom? Yeah. I thank you all for coming to the community meeting. I appreciate your attendance and interest, and this is quite a showing. A lot better than I had expected, and so I'm glad to see such a diverse group of people, including one geomorphologist, which is amazing. So, and a baby. So I'll try and pitch it sort of towards the middle of the technical range. It has been more than a pleasure to work on this project. Hope Valley is one of my favorite places on the planet. So it's been I'm just very grateful for the opportunity. I've been spending so much time here over the last couple of years and over maybe the last 10 years or so that I've been working in the basin. As I said earlier, my name is Dan Malman. I'm a geomorphologist and a project manager with Waterways Consulting in Portland, Oregon. And we've been working on this project with Lauren Roach from Watershed Resiliency Consulting, who introduced himself a moment ago. So some of this these first couple of slides Kim already covered. Oops. Pointer is working. It's not working. Let's see. We don't have a pointer. I may have to.
It's right there.
It's not really responding to my mouse. Well, I may have to just walk over and point. So some of this has already been covered, but this is a watershed scale planning project for the West Carson River in the California side. As shown in green, that's the watershed boundary. The project has been funded primarily by the US EPA 319 program, which focuses on improving water quality in waterways throughout the United States. And there's also been a partial match by the Carson Water Subconservancy District. So appreciate very much the funding and the funding sources, as well as the leadership provided by Kimra and the Alpine Watershed Group. So Kimra mentioned the West Fork Carson River Vision Plan, which was led by Danny McClure, who's sitting here. One of the things that the West Fork Carson River Vision Plan, this is a relatively recent document that came out. This planning document focused on improving water quality in the West Carson Basin in California. And one of the things that this plan laid out or identified as being a project that should be done for the water quality in the watershed is a geomorphological model and prioritization plan. And the project that was identified here had two parts. First, a geomorphological understanding, develop a geomorphological understanding of the watershed. And second, based on that understanding, to identify and prioritize stream restoration projects that might help improve water quality in the watershed. So first, I'll talk about I'll speak about both of these two parts of the project in turn, and I'll stop after the first part and ask for questions. But like Kimra said, please feel free to interject with any questions. I definitely would prefer a conversation to a lecture. So I prepared about like 30 minutes or so of slides, but if there's conversation, it may take a little bit longer. You know,
Please speak out of the microphone.
This microphone, I believe, is just for Zoom. It doesn't amplify my voice. I'll try and speak louder though. Yeah. So the first part of the project is to try and understand the geomorphology of the watershed. So the subtitle of this part of the presentation and the project could be, where's the sediment coming from? Where's the sediment coming from? The first question you may be asking yourself is what the heck is geomorphology anyway? And this is a question that I get a lot from my friends and my family when anybody asks me what I do for a living. So I'll explain that. Geomorphology it refers to, so geo, earth, morph means shape. Geomorphology can refer to either the landforms or the processes that form the landscape, that create landforms and features and move around material on the landscape. So either the landforms or the processes. So how does geomorphology affect water quality in the watershed? So for the West Carson Basin, geomorphology primarily is referring to rivers and glaciers. And in the West Carson, one of the pollutants of concern, one of the water quality constituents that's been identified in the West Carson Vision Plan is fine sediment, also known as turbidity. So that's one of the fine sediment is moved around by geomorphic processes. The other part of this is that many types of constituents, nutrients, nettles are bound onto particles of sediment. And so their movement also is determined by processes of rivers and glaciers and landslides and these kinds of things, geomorphology. So the project goal overall is to try to understand the geomorphology and sediment sources well enough to identify and prioritize stream restoration projects in the watershed. Well, the crux of this project is this question: where is the sediment coming from? And that's a geological question. It has mostly a geological answer. So I'll describe a little bit about the geology of the watershed here. The West Carson watershed in the California part sort of is divided geologically into two parts. There's the upper basin, Hope Valley and above, which is dominated by glacial features, big, wide, glacial carved valleys like Hope Valley and Faith Valley, and the peaks, volcanic and granitic peaks. In the lower basin,
as most of you know, probably much better than I do. You know, the lower basin is dominated by a canyon. You know, there's no place for sediment to be stored. In the upper basin, these big glacial valleys have floodplains, and it's the exchange of sediment between the river and the floodplain. Downstream of Hope Valley, there's not a whole lot of place for sediment to go. The river's kind of locked in a canyon. So where are what are the sources of sediment in the basin? If you look around, you'll see a few. The most obvious one to my eye is bank erosion, which shown here on the left. This is the stream bank. This is Bella standing there measuring stream bank erosion in Hope Valley, and that's a really obvious source of sediment, fine grain sediment into the river. When the river banks collapse, that puts sediment directly into the river, as opposed to some other processes. It takes a little bit longer for the sediment to get into the river. The other primary source of sediment in the watershed is from upland erosion or hill slope erosion. So this consists of landslides, gullies, erosion on roads, and things like that are they're maybe exacerbated by wildfires. These are the two primary sources of sediment in the basin. So we're looking for those. But not just what are the sources, but what's important here, at least for identifying ways to control water quality, improve water quality, is how much sediment. So one of the tools in geomorphology that we use sometimes is called a sediment budget. And that's just like it sounds. It's an accounting of where's the sediment coming from, where is it going to, what are the sources, what are the sinks, what are the transport rates, and things like this. It's really like a budget that you have for your family, trying to understand you're trying to understand where the money's coming from, where it's going to. And if you have an issue with your budget, then you need to understand those things in order to fix it. So this is what we're doing. That's the purpose of a sediment budget. Over here on the right is kind of a schematic diagram for a sediment budget for a very different river system. But just to give you the idea, that's for the Coeur d'Alene River in Idaho. It's a sediment budget that I worked on maybe 10 years ago or something like that. And the upper diagram shows the white arrows show the different geomorphic processes that move sediment. So sediment transport in the river, flux in, flux out, bank erosion, sediment moving into the floodplain and being stored, and so forth. And on the bottom are the results of the sediment budget. The sources and the sinks and quantified and like tons per year. So for the West Carson Basin, this study, we did a sediment budget. You have a question?
All those sources, I don't think you mentioned bird areas, fire scars. No fire scars in the West Fork Carson.
I haven't. Well, two pieces to that. One is I don't think there's fires have been recently an issue in the West Carson as they have been in the East Carson Basin, but they may in the future. So yes, you're exactly right. Wildfires cause lots of sediment to get into the rivers, but that fits into the upland erosion part. So there's gullying that's going on, gullying and erosion on the surfaces of the hill slopes. If there's a fire, as you pointed out, those processes are accelerated quite a bit. So I think that's how wildfires fit into the sediment budget. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. So we measured a sediment budget, or we estimated a sediment budget in different ways. I'm not going to get into the details of the sediment budget over the last couple of years we worked on, but I'll just talk about the different components of the budget and then jump right to the results. But if you have any questions, again, about what we did, how we measured things, please ask. So there's four components of the sediment budget in the West Carson. The first two I already touched on: the sediment sources, the upland erosion piece, and the stream bank erosion. And then there's the storage component. The only place that sediment, once it's been generated and put into the river where it can go, are floodplains. So we need to estimate that. And then the last piece is the export of sediment through the river, sediment transport out of the basin down at the California-Nevada border as measured at a stream gauge near there. And there's an example of what we did for measuring bank erosion. Up on the top is a photo of Caitlin and Bella and Lauren measuring bank erosion in mapping bank erosion in Hope Valley. So we used a combination for bank erosion of mapping in the field and aerial photographic analysis. So we looked at where the river was at different times, and we could see how fast it moved, and that that helps us understand the amount of sediment that's getting into the river through that process.
Since the upper basin is significant, is the floodplain deposition portion significant?
I'm going to get to that in the next slide.
Okay.
That's a great question. So for bank erosion, just to finish that thought, the bank erosion, what we want up with are these maps. We have a series of maps like this one that show not only how much bank erosion that we have in the basin, but actually where specifically it is. And this is a function of all the mapping that was done with the help of Bella and Caitlin from Alpine Watershed Group and Lauren Roach. So we have these maps, these detailed maps of bank erosion. All of these process rates were estimated in like tons per year.
Yeah, just the sediment yield we have in tons per year, like tons per acre per year, or tons per the whole entire watershed.
Yes. So for the people on Zoom, the question is, were these sediment process rates measured in tons per year or tons per acre per year? And they per square mile, yeah, per area. The answer is in tons per year, the total amount. Some of them don't. Some of them, like you said, they lend themselves to estimating per square mile, like the upland erosion rates, the hill slope erosion. But others, like how much sediment is being transported at the boundary.
The bottom of the water.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So yeah, tons per year is our units that we're using. And here's the answer. I'll just cut to the chase. This is a kind of funny looking diagram that shows the results of the sediment budget. So what we have here is the widths of these lines and arrows are proportional to the transport rates by these four different processes. Up on the top, you've got the sources of sediment, and down on the bottom is the amount that sediment that's getting stored. And over to the right, you see that there's about 5,000 tons per year that's being transported out of the basin, past the gauge at Woodford's. So the first thing that pops out to me is consistent with what you see when you go hiking around in the watershed, which is that stream bank erosion seems to be the most dominant process supplying sediment in this watershed. Upland erosion is a factor, but not nearly as large. And sediment, some of that sediment gets deposited in the floodplain. You're asking about that, but it's relatively small fraction of what's being generated. So when you look at the balance between what's in the valleys themselves, between what's being mobilized in the valley versus what's being stored, there's an imbalance there. There's more sediment coming out of the valley than is going into the valley, and that's one of the main conclusions of the sediment budget. This is quite a reversal, actually. At least, so this is a representation of what I think. This is my opinion, my interpretation based on what I see in the field, of what the sediment budget would have been hundreds to thousands of years ago. at some point in the past, recent geologic past, a lot of sediment was getting stored in the valleys. You know, a lot of that material, you can see it, you can see evidence for that everywhere. This picture in the bottom right shows big stacks of fine-grained sediment that are stored in the valleys. So at some point, after the glaciers receded, erosion was happening in the watershed, and a lot of that material was going into the valleys. And for various reasons, which we could maybe talk about in discussion, like most of that sediment was depositing in the valleys, filling up these flat valleys. That's why we have these sediment-filled glacial valleys today. And stream bank erosion would have been a much slower process, less stream bank erosion, and probably quite a bit less fine sediment leaving the basin. So quite a shift.
Okay, one thing I didn't catch, the bottom of your study, like 89, what's the Diamond Valley Road Bridge or?
That's a good question. So the question for people on Zoom is, where's the downstream boundary of our watershed that we're studying for the sediment budget? Officially, it's the state line, California-Nevada state line. In practice, there's a very long-term stream gauge, which is near Woodford, downstream of Woodford's. I think it's downstream of Woodford's. That's been there for a very long time, where the USGS and others have been, the swamp program have been sampling sediment. So the project is to estimate the sediment flux at the state line, but the data is from a few miles upstream. Yeah. I was going to say something else. I feel like I was going to say something else on this slide. Well, the big, I guess this is the big picture, maybe just to reiterate. Oh, yes, this is the only graph that I have in the presentation, and it's not super easy, straightforward to understand, but it's really important to understanding the results of our study. And so I'll linger here a little bit. I'll describe this graph, and if anybody has any questions, please ask. So this is a graph. On the bottom axis, the x-axis here is the distance along the West Carson River. Upstream is on the left and downstream is on the right. The vertical axis, the y-axis here, is the cumulative amount of bank erosion that is occurring upstream of any point on the river. So, for example, like here at River Mile 17, if you go up to the red line from 17 and over to the left, there's 4,000 tons per year of bank erosion upstream of River Mile 17. So the reason that it's shown this way is because where this line is steep, that shows the places where sediment is being added to the river at the greatest rate. And the thing that clearly jumps out is that about 60% of the sediment leaving the basin is coming from bank erosion just within Hope Valley, just within that 7-mile stretch of Hope Valley. That's where most of the sediment in the basin is coming from, that's causing the turbidity issues downstream.
Are these three exclusive, or do they affect each other? Like improvements in Faith Valley and Canyon Reach, do they decrease Hope Valleys, or is it independently eroding that much in each of those independently?
Well, I'm not entirely sure I understand your question, but I'll try and restate it. Like I think you're asking
a dynamic relationship here going on.
Are you asking about the graph? Like whether the graph is affected by what
you're reducing the upper watershed? Do they reduce the tons per year in the lower watershed going out, or is that just totally independent of the other two?
You suggesting it would be that management action in one of the upper water.
Thank you, Brenda.
I think that's what he's trying to say.
So if we fix bank erosion in Faith Valley, is that going to fix bank erosion in Hope Valley,
or reduce Hope Valley's erosion?
I don't think so. I don't think it will. Yeah, I mean, if we fix
all the erosion in Faith Valley, and some of it has been fixed, actually. We're not reducing, at least, I've never thought about it that way, but I can't think of any reason why that would, why the work that's been in Faith Valley, why that would reduce erosion in Hope Valley downstream. I think so. I think the answer is no. Yeah.
I understand, so what you're doing in Hope Valley includes what came from Faith Valley.
On this graph, right? So I wish that
It's not just coming from Hope Valley. It's found in Hope Valley source.
It's the steepness of the graph is what you're.
So yeah. So if this graph, let's just hypothetically, let's just say that we stopped all the erosion in Faith Valley. What would this graph look like? It would be, the mouse isn't really responding. It would be flat. It would be flat at 0 down to here, and then it would go up like this. Does that make sense? Yeah. Another question.
You're also looking, like I said, organic versus inorganic. I mean, most of our ground is DG. When we have organic material or the flat material that roots get deeper, a lot less erosion. Are you looking at that?
How about how the plants affect erosion of the banks, like the root strength?
Soil, okay. Most of our soil here is DG, decomposed grain, right? When there's organic material, it's the vegetation, the roots are deeper, there's less erosion. So I'm asking you, are you looking into that at the same time?
That's a really good question. So for Zoom, the question is, are we accounting for the effects of plants on erosion? Is that right? Am I getting that? Or are you saying that the soil type? I see. Okay.
Versus DG.
Okay. I'm with you. I will say that we are looking at different types of sediment. We're looking at the fine grain sediment. So two things. One is there's there's one type of sediment that we're not looking at, which is the coarse grain sediment, the gravel that's moving in the bed load. That's not really contributing to turbidity. So we're focusing just on the fine grain sediment. So that's one part of the answer. The other part of the answer is, do we account for organic material? Like if we're estimating all the material that's dropping from the riverbanks into the river, that's going to include both the fine set. No, I'm not answering your question. I apologize. Do you want to try and ask it again, because I must not be.
Well, the point is this: when we have pure DG, water goes right. When we have organic material, water is held from the long periods. And so the vegetation, the roots get deeper and it slows down erosion. So if you're not looking at that perspective, as far as where sediments coming from, I think you're missing this perspective.
I see. I think I see. You're talking about what's happening up on the hill slopes, or the.
You know, I think you probably map this stuff out. Where you have duff, litter, and trees, so high needles, the erosion zero, no matter what type of substrate it is. If it's a barren area, then it's eroded.
Yes.
Raindrops splash, real erosion. So that's why, you know, you're mapping all those areas out to calculate that, right?
Right. So I think what you're also, implying that the question is about how the organic material on the hill slopes affect the amount of erosion. And I don't know. I think the way that we estimated the erosion rates on the hills and the uplands and the hill slopes is there was a very large study of erosion rates in the Lake Tahoe Basin in the early 2000s. And so we transferred those rates to similar basins, watersheds in the West Carson watershed.
So, and those account for, I think they're based on measurements of sediment leaving those basins from stream gauges. So it accounts, I think, primarily, I mean, we're mainly looking at the geologic erosion. So of entire watersheds lumped together. We're not separating out areas that are vegetated and unvegetated. We're looking at the bottoms of these watersheds that have some areas with plants in them and some that are exposed granite, decomposed granite that's eroding. I sense that I'm not answering your question, or maybe I'm not understanding it. And so
Picture, because Hope Valley has a lot of good organic soil. It's not pure to deep. When you get into steep areas like Woodford's Canyon that burnt 20, 30 years ago, and more reasonable places, the point of this is that that's pure TG. And that's probably where most of your sediment is.
I think
you can just drive around our ground in Alpine County and see where it's your soil is primarily G is nothing starts growing, and then where it's growing heavily, it's you go and soak the soil up, feel it, smell it, it's organic. That's very important. In the study, when you look at your 17-mile it starts to go up. I speculate that a good amount of that is coming from the slopes. The whole canyon, Woodford's Canyon is pure TG.
Yeah.
If you look at, everybody's been up West Fork Canyon, the trail, you have a slope wash, so thick, it goes right into the stream. There's no, it's about 100% slope on both sides.
Yeah.
Just a conveyor belt of essentially DG going into the stream.
Right. That is true. That is a piece of the sediment budget. It's smaller. It's that piece is the upland, that hill slope component. And that amounts to, like, I think about 14,000 tons per year. This graph right here doesn't include that. This graph is only looking at the bank erosion. So there's the part that comes from the hill slopes, and how we've estimated that is we've looked at similar, like Horse Thief Canyon, like you described. We looked for a watershed with a similar geology, a similar topography in the Lake Tahoe Basin, where there's been an estimate of the erosion rate of the hill slopes, and we applied that value to Horse Thief Canyon, and then we did the same thing for a lot of different basins, all the different subwatersheds within West Carson, and we added that all up, and it comes out to a relatively, not a zero, but a relatively small number compared with how much erosion is happening in the valley floor than itself. The bank erosion is, even though, like, you look and you can see a lot of the rilling, like you described, a lot of material getting into the river from the hill slopes in certain parts of the watershed, that really is small compared with when you add up all of the erosion along the riverbanks in Hope Valley. So I don't know. I'd be really, I love to like have like debates like this. It's like one of my favorite things, and I would love to chat about it afterwards if I'm not answering your question or if you disagree with what I'm saying. But the conclusion of our study, once we looked at it and we added everything up the best way that we could, is that what you're talking about is only a relatively small component of the budget.
So it's like you're saying that these numbers reflect a variety of habitat conditions within the watershed.
Yeah.
All of the above, if you measure it out of a variety of places.
Yeah, habitat and geological and topographical conditions are all come together to determine what the erosion rate in a watershed is. You look at what you said is absolutely right. The vegetation is really important to how much erosion is happening on hill slopes, and also the vegetation in the valleys is important to how much bank erosion is occurring, because the root strength in the in vegetated riverbanks, it slows it down considerably. And then actually that gets into the management part of the project, this effort as well. But like what you said is absolutely right, that
vegetation is a really important factor. There are also other factors, geology. Glacial till erodes more than volcanic rocks, and volcanic watersheds erode more than granitic watersheds. Watersheds that are steep and have a lot of relief erode a lot faster than ones that are, more rolling landscapes. So there's a lot of different factors. Vegetation is absolutely an important factor. Yeah. Brenda. Please, yeah, please. No, I prefer that.
They're independent. And I'm wondering about the sediment that's coming out of Faith Valley and into Hope Valley. Is there a potential for it to help upgrade the system so that you are getting kind of potential access to the floodplain, not having such a super loaded side and banks? I'm just curious about that, and maybe that's a bench.
No, I like that question. I think I'm understanding you're asking is all the erosion that's happening in Faith Valley, can that material deposit in the riverbed and then and a grade meaning build up the elevation of the river closer to the floodplain and reduce bank erosion that way. That's a great thought. Unfortunately, I think the answer is no, because the bank erosion that's happening upstream is fine grain. This is fine grain sediment that's traveling in suspension in the river, and it's not really depositing in the bed. So what you need what you need in order to grade the bed is a lot of bed load. And what we learned in the Faith Valley building the project is that the West Carson River is bed load limited. There's not enough. Unfortunately, there's just not enough gravel to upgrade the bed very easily. And so that's going to be a challenge when we get to the management plan, trying to manage continuity of bed loads so that we can actually do what you're talking about. Upgrade the bed is going to be an issue. But there's a really important distinction that you're pointing to, which is in geomorphology and sediment, is like there's a big difference between the fine grained sediment and the coarse grained sediment. They behave differently, they travel differently, they deposit in different places, and they affect the river differently. The fine grained sediment is what we're worried about with the turbidity. That's what interacts with the floodplain. The coarse grained sediment, the bed load, is what forms the river channel and the in-stream habitat and degrades the channel. So they interact with each other, but they're very, very different. They behave differently. And so if you're eroding fine grained sediment upstream, it's not going to deposit, unfortunately, in Hope Valley in the riverbed. Okay. This is the summary of that first part of the project, the geological part of this study. So just recapping, nearly all of the fine grained sediment is coming from the upper watershed, where there's glacial till, where there's big valleys with floodplains eroding. And within the upper basin, what we found is that by far the biggest source of sediment, fine grained sediment, is erosion of the riverbanks. And most of that is actually happening in Hope Valley itself. And the other conclusion, maybe this is not as much of a conclusion as an interpretation, is that what we're seeing is that there's been a shift in the balance of sediment in the valleys from historic or geologic time when the valleys were filling and there was like a negative, I guess that would be a positive sediment balance. There's accumulation of fine grained sediment, and there's been a shift. The rivers, the streams have cut down, which is a process that we call incision. Channels cut down, and that leaves very high, unstable, eroding banks like we see today. So you're increasing the amount of fine sediment going in through bank erosion. But you're also, by incising the channels, what's also happened is it reduces the amount of floodplain sedimentation. And the reason that is because previously, like before the channels cut down,
there was a lot more frequent flooding. The channels had a smaller flood conveyance capacity. That's the technical term. They could carry less water, so more frequently and more frequency and magnitude of overbank floods carrying sediment out and settling it onto the floodplain. So by incising the channels, what's happened is the sediment balance has shifted doubly, both by increasing the erosion and also by reducing the sedimentation. This balance has shifted. So what that points to is an approach for using geomorphology and stream restoration to reduce turbidity or improve water quality. And that is to look for opportunities in the basin where we could shift the balance back a little bit towards less bank erosion and more sediment deposition by doing what Brenda described, is maybe bringing the channels up a little bit closer to the floodplain. So you have more frequent flooding, and you also have not quite so high riverbanks. And that's the conclusion of that first part of the project. Is there any other? And maybe it's a good time to stop and see if there are any other questions before I move on to the project's identification part. Yeah.
Here, I'm 15 and I was clear when I look at it. But what is your concern? Ground stream and usage to effective? Or it's 19 the gauge from the what's our goal?
That is an excellent question. And when I shared this presentation with my wife, and she asked that same question. And I'm not the best person to answer the question. Danny, I think McClure would be a better person than I would to answer that question. I have some ideas, but would you?
Well, I got fisheries okay. We're pumping in thousands of tons of hatchery fish. Yeah, it's kind of a, we don't know what the native fishery would be.
I see.
Limited from food because the fine sediments, clogging the places, the interstitial spaces where the bugs live.
Yeah.
You have to have a study to do, bioassessment or something. We probably did that, probably determined.
That's not in our scope of work, but these are two different questions, I think, but they're related. So the first question, just for the Zoom people, was why do we care about turbidity? And then the second question is about how does turbidity specifically affect fish? And I could take a stab, but I would be really interested to hear what maybe some other people in this room might have to say about the answer to the first question.
Yeah, so it's a good question. Yes. Yeah, hi, I'm Davey for a good question. So, and probably our colleagues fishing wildlife would be well qualified to answer the question about biological. So, do we have water quality standards and wilderness for turbidity checks, beneficial uses? So that mentioned, there's growth impacts that sediment can have on fish, swamp beds also impacted biological community. The other thing, and I'm not a biologist, I'm an engineer, but the other thing that's relevant for sediment is it also is indicative of transporting a bunch of other things. Storage that like eutrophication, we have seen some algal bloom within streams issues in Carson. So that also is another thing that's a good reason to. So those are examples of some of the physical effects. And then we have a water quality smooth, particularly currently not the. So the goal is to water. And as you mentioned, though, some topic, the clearer it is, And our water quality standard is based partly on historical conditions, several decades. So there has been what appears to be some degradation in that. Project to help bring back some conditions that were in place when that was established. And I think, you know, natural conditions are like there's going to be a lot
I would just ask, you know, kind of look into the same vessel change to the future and also the sediment looking at it. It's now carrying soil and not which is also which why would you chicken do
One thing I can think of too, that
you want to sit over? Hey, boy.
yeah.
Again, I just thought of the sediment also, it was light penetration into the screen. And then you have algae, that's primary production. That's what the grazers eat. And then you have the whole food chain is built on you know, the primary production of the stream, which is based on the streams being clear and light penetrating to the bottom to the algae and other primary producers of bugs.
Thank you. Thank you. Another question. I'm noticing the time, it's 6:30, and I really want to at least briefly describe the potential projects and prioritization. But I what about your question?
Is it really just surface of the riverbed and above? Are you talking about like the water tables, groundwater, you know, just from the residents here?
Yeah, so that's a good question. The question is, what does geomorphology include? What is this, and what does this specific project include? Does it include groundwater? The answer to whether geomorphology is sort of like it's related to groundwater, but that's not part of, you know, that's a kind of you know, a different area of studying is hydrology, but the geomorphology and the restoration projects that we're identifying would affect the groundwater. So, for example, if the stream beds were up higher, closer to the floodplain, and there's more flooding that's occurring, then that's going to be more frequent recharging of the groundwater and raising the water table in certain areas. So that's one way that they're connected. Yeah.
And that's no small thing to mention. Because if the stream down cuts and the groundwater drains out of the meadow, lowers the water table, and you have sedges and other water ground noise to hold up a stream bank.
Yeah. Yeah.
They dry out. Tangled.
Yeah. Right. It's all cyclical, you know, interrelated. It's interesting to me. To me, it's very interesting, all those interconnections. You don't separate.
Comment on that. And that is that if you live here and you look at your sinkholes, the river goes up and down the same levels as sinkholes. So the water, it's all connected. It's totally connected. They're not separate.
Yeah. Yeah, they're absolutely connected. Yeah. But for us to incorporate trying to model and understand all the groundwater within the West Fork Carson River watershed, it's just not in our scope of work to do. We're focused here on sediment and geomorphology and how stream restoration can affect that. So I'm going to take that segue to talk about the second half. I'll try and do this a little bit faster, but again, please, you know, I really appreciate all these questions. I think it makes it a lot easier for me to present, and I can see that everybody is asking questions. It's really helpful. Thank you. So based on this approach that came out of the sediment budget, I went on tried to identify projects that could fit into this model that I just described. So again, the approach coming out of the sediment budget to reducing fine sediment encourage more water to go into the floodplain. And I spoke about that. You just this gentleman just described some of the other benefits. Not only by doing this, not only are we reducing sediment, but we're having other benefits. One is the groundwater piece is like the geomorphology affects the groundwater because we put more water into the floodplains, put more sediment into floodplains, raise the groundwater table, improve the vegetation. That's a benefit. Another benefit is the in-stream habitat. Generally, incised channels are very simplified, but when we bring the channel up, we spread water out onto the floodplain that deposits gravel. Depositing gravel creates river bars, which create pools, and we get more complexity in the stream when we bring the channel up. Somebody mentioned maybe not that there's also going to be water temperature effects. We store water during floods. We store water in the floodplain. That comes out months later when the stream flow is lower during the warmer months of the year, and it could have water temperature effects. And another piece is that by putting water into the floodplain during floods, we also have the potential to attenuate floods, reduce flood risk downstream by spreading out water. It brings the size of the flood down, spreads out the hydrograph, if that means anything to you. So there's multiple benefits of this approach. And so what we did with Lauren and myself and others that were helping with this project is we looked throughout the basin for opportunities where we might be able to increase flooding, increase the frequency, the magnitude of flooding and floodplain sedimentation, bring the channel up closer to the floodplain. We did this using field reconnaissance, topographic analysis. We did quite a bit of hydraulic modeling. There's an example of some hydraulic modeling over on the right. I'm going to skip over explaining that just in the interest of time. So we identified just again based on the geomorphology and the topography and the physical features in the landscape only. We identified 25 potential areas where we could do this. We didn't look at in this first pass at any property ownership issues, permitting questions, constructability, access, any of those things in the first pass. So we identified, just looking at the geomorphology, 25 places around the basin, both in the main stem and in tributaries, where it might be possible to do what we're talking about. And of those 25, we picked 15 of them to advance these project ideas to a concept level where we can evaluate their feasibility and score them, these projects on different metrics. I would also like to point out that those 15 projects don't include all the potential ecological restoration projects that could be done in the basin. There's been others that have been proposed, particularly by American Rivers, other meadow restoration projects that are very, very worthwhile. But we focused on the ones primarily that are going to potentially affect water quality issues. So we picked 15 of them. And then what we did was we looked into them. We did field visits, some each of these 15 places, some of them multiple field visits. We did hydraulic modeling of potential projects. We looked at some of the things that we normally look at when we are evaluating the feasibility of restoration projects. We weren't able to get to a design for these projects, but we just wanted to develop them far enough along till we can understand, what the potential benefits and what the challenges might be. So we have these for each of these 15 projects. As an example, we created these project description sheets like this one. We had to find what the specific objectives of each project would be, the likely, features in the project elements, likely outcomes, the benefits that would happen, costs, logistical hurdles, and so on. the point where we can just have an idea of is this a good idea or not a worthwhile idea. And then we went and myself and Lauren, who's on this call, we visited all these. We scored each project on 20 different metrics, which we call indicators. Those are the ones that are listed over on the right. For example, access, constructability, water quality, fine sediment reduction, habitat, floodplain habitat, in-stream habitat improvements, etc., flood benefit. So 20 different metrics. And so the way that we did this was Lauren and I both visited each of these projects. We independently provided a value from 1 to 5 for each of these metrics. And then we came back and we did a desktop analysis and we reconciled mostly they agreed, but we updated them, the scores for using the desktop assessment as well as the field assessment from 2 people. But all of these factors aren't equally important when you're trying to decide whether to implement a restoration project, are they? Some of them are more important, some of them are more important than others. And this is where we try to incorporate stakeholder values into the prioritization. So what we did, we used this framework called multiple accounts analysis, which is kind of a fancy sounding word, but it is just like a really simple framework for weighting different factors differently. So in order to do that, the Alpine Watershed Group solicited feedback from different stakeholders in the basin, many of whom are sitting here or on Zoom, try and understand what the different values are, what's the relative importance of different features of projects to people, technical environmental benefits versus the cost of a project. That's a value judgment, which that those belong to people who live here and not an outside consultant. So we got responses from 18 different people, from agencies and nonprofits, a private business owner in the basin as well. And so then we have this weighting. And one thing that I wanted to that I noticed looking at all the results is that there's really a lot of consistency between what the different 18 different people said, and that this is just like the first level of I guess I lied. This is a second graph, but there's just consistency between what people valued in this project. Environmental values, the environmental benefits were prioritized the most, followed by technical aspects. So the constructability, the feasibility of actually getting these projects to work, so on, followed by economic and social and cultural factors. And then jumping to the results, the prioritization. This is a list of projects. The number of the projects goes from downstream as project 1 and up, going from downstream to upstream. But this table ranks the projects according to the overall score of each of the projects. But you could also look at it, like you could resort this table if you're more interested to see, which ones have the biggest environmental benefit and which ones are most technically feasible to. So you can look at all these results in different ways, and in our report, we'll have a bunch of different tables. I don't want to show lots of tables, but the ones that rose to the top, for the most part, are the like some of the smaller projects, and tributaries. These are low impact projects, sorry, not low impact. They're low disturbance, low risk, low cost, and they have maybe a moderate environmental benefit. But also some of the projects like that have a very large environmental benefit, but are very complex to implement, also placed high. And over on the right, I've kind of given my interpretation of what I think is worth looking at in different ways. So some of the projects with I very much think we should look at, consider doing, implementing, trying to find funding for. Some of them we need to look a little bit more and see if they're worthwhile. And then there's some that sort of fell out. The benefits don't seem to justify the costs and the complexity of these projects. Just showing this in a different way. This is a map of the project rankings. The numbers are the rankings. The green ones are the higher ranking projects, and the red are the lower ranking projects. And so the first thing that's obvious here to me is that, you know, all of the high ranking projects are in the upper basin. And then in the lower basin, these are most of these don't they may or may not pan out. These are private and private land. There's a lot of land uses, irrigation infrastructure that's going to be affected, private landowners that would be affected, and need to buy into the project. There's also some technical issues, like the channel's quite incised down there, so it'd be quite a big lift to bring the channel back up to the floodplain in these areas. So we're looking at the ones in the upper basin, it seems like, for restoration. This is a map of the smaller, showing the kind of the higher ranking small projects. So we can call these low hanging fruit, I suppose. These are lower, like I think I actually said this already. These are the ones that have lower cost, lower risk. I think actually a lot of these projects could be built with community volunteer help. Things like this, they're easy to design. They're not going to cause problems. And in this group, I also added here not just the ones that we identified, but also three projects. They say AR. Those are ones that upland meadow restoration projects that American Rivers had done a meadows restoration assessment. I think it was in 2018, and identified quite a few meadows, both in the East Fork and the West Fork basins. And three of them were recommended that aren't part of ours. And so I've shown these here. So there's a bunch of these low hanging fruit that people can do. As well, some of the larger scale, high ranking restoration projects that are shown here. As you can see, a lot of them, the highest ranking big projects are in Hope Valley. And that's not surprising, you know, considering some of the findings of the first part of this study, this is where all the fine sediment is coming from. But these are going to be pretty complex. And as I think Brenda asked, you know, how does the upstream project affect the downstream project? The ones in Hope Valley are going to be interrelated. And there's quite a few reasons to consider them, not just as one-off projects, one by one, but instead to think of, you know, restoring Hope Valley as a big long-term program rather than a project. And that brings me to the takeaways here of this part of the presentation. So there's two things that we would recommend. This is our interpretation of our second part of our study. Is there's these low-hanging fruit projects, and there's a list. We have a list of them, and these can be done and have benefit, multiple types of benefits. They can be implemented as funding is available, as staff resources are available. Project proponents from Alpine Watershed Group, American Rivers, I don't know, Cal Trout, other groups who want to take on some of these projects can get them funded and do them. Those are a very worthwhile piece of the puzzle. And then the other piece, Hope Valley, rebuild Hope Valley. This is a lot easier said than done. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. I would think of it as maybe a 20-year-long effort, you know, to fix this iconic, you know, important landscape, but worth it. There are a lot of interrelated projects that are worth doing, but they're interrelated, and so they should be considered together. So recommend, you know, getting all stakeholders involved in a program to fix Hope Valley over a long period of time. Get everybody involved early, define what the restoration objectives are and a long-term plan that can be carried out. Rather than just, site-specific treatments, which have been useful. They've been done in Hope Valley. There's been site-specific treatments that have had a lot of value. But what we're recommending here is, consider them together. You can do the pieces, but first have a plan. How are they going to interact? How is the funding going to work? Who's going to take them on? What can we learn from past projects that can be applied to future projects and so on? And then another really helpful thing that we have going for us in Hope Valley is that we have some lessons that can be learned from past work. In Faith Valley, I mentioned, one of the lessons of Faith Valley is that there's this limitation bed load. There's not enough bed load really. So we have to maybe when we consider this, keep track of, how the continuity of bed loads so that we're not trapping, like do the first project at the upstream end and then there's no gravel that can come down and grade the channel downstream. So and then there's also projects in Hope Valley that have had some successes and some lessons as well. So and another thing about Faith Valley is that we can it's a scale model of I'm sorry, of Faith Valley is a scale model. It's been done and try to envision what's going to happen in Hope Valley, which is much more high profile, much more visible. People care a lot about what it's going to look like in Hope Valley. If you want to see what it might look like, go to Faith Valley, take people to Faith Valley and look, is that something you would like to see downstream? So there's some resources from past work. And that's all that I have prepared. And I just wanted to some acknowledgements, and especially Kimra. I did everything that could possibly be done jumping into this project as a leader to help this project go as smoothly as possible. And I thank all the people that have helped provide data input on values and coming to community meetings like this. So thank you very much. And maybe there's more questions. I don't know if there's time for them though, but thanks.
Specifically describe some of the on-the-ground projects you're proposing and what they would entail, bringing in vegetation, landscapes, whatever they are. We have a specific picture of what those priority projects are.
Yes, yeah. So the question for Zoomers is describe some of the projects. So we actually were a couple of the low-hanging fruit projects that I mentioned. Those are easy and relatively speaking. And we're already developing designs for two of them as part of this project. One is in Willow Creek and one is in the lower Red Lake Creek. And those ones are primarily like focused on what we sometimes call low-tech process-based restoration. Also like beaver restoration. So these are projects where we would maybe install use hand crews primarily rather than heavy equipment. Install things called beaver dam analogs to retain sediment and water on the landscape. Do quite a bit of willow revegetation, especially in areas where we expect that the water table is going to come up. So those are definitely things that can be done by volunteers. There's not a whole lot of risk associated with that. So there's a bunch of those. Two of them are going to have designs, or at least preliminary designs, this spring. And then as far as the Hope Valley projects, I would say we didn't do designs for those yet. I think that's going to be a longer term process. But some ideas include the nice thing. It's in a couple of the Hope Valley areas where the valley goes from being very wide into a narrow boulder confined canyon reaches. Those transitions are really good opportunities for doing what we're talking about, raising the riverbed, because we can actually put some kind of like a grade control feature that will raise the bed, but it doesn't have the risk of being flanked. Like if we just build, like a big rock grade control in the middle of Hope Valley, what's to keep the river from going around it. But in a couple of areas in Hope Valley, there's a good place for doing that. And that's something that's actually been done in Faith Valley. And you can go and look and see, you can see that it's raised the water table. It's created, quite a bit of good stable habitat and stabilized the base level of Faith Valley so that some of the upstream beaver dam analogs can be implemented. So those are a couple of examples, but all this stuff's gonna be in the report, and there's a project description for each of these 15 projects. And I think the next question was Danny.
I was actually just gonna ask, it's the same thing.
Same question? Okay.
I don't know. I mean, I've seen like for some of the top projects, looked at, the maps of where they are. Maybe we don't have time to put those up.
Do you want me to go back to the map?
Well, the map, the maps for the specific project.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, I guess for those who are looking, a little bit more details, like they really did see.
So those are available. You don't have to even read the whole report. It's just an appendix. It's got 15 of these project descriptions, and then the scoring with descriptions of like, this is what we evaluated for the access and the constructability. These are some of the design considerations and limitations for each of those 15 projects. I think it might be hard to go through them now. Yeah.
I missed it, but is this report published? Can we get a hold of it?
Working on it. It'll be ready in the next couple of months is the actual report, where we'll have a draft soon, and then it'll be put out by Alpine Watershed Group in March, I believe.
So our goal here was to share, get feedback, and then February 16th, the first draft of the report is due to the State Water Board, and then we have to turn it around pretty quick to get it finalized. But I'm happy to share any information right now.
I'm surprised there wasn't more on what this project's on, like diagrams and schematics, things like that. I mean, it's not. So we can just go out there and implement this project, so that there will be SEPA, alteration for world cooperative. There's a long way to go, right?
And even the ones that Dan describes as low hanging fruit and relatively low cost is the key thing. We're a little nonprofit organizations. The whole goal is not for AWG to do all these projects. The whole goal is for partners and other stakeholders to have this menu to choose from. And it's not going to be like 1 through 15 we go through the list. It's like what funding opportunities are available and how do we match those with higher priority opportunities.
Are any of these on private land?
The the ones that range lower were the ones that were on private land. So there's possibilities for some improvements, but less bang for your buck and more complications.
So maybe they're like an HDF, maybe they're property land.
So in advance of coming here today, we met with both the Forest Service. We have the hydrologist Don Klosowski with us today. We also met with California Department of Fish and Wildlife because a couple of projects are on CDFW land. So, and then we also have been in conversations with the Washoe Tribe of Nevada. We want to make sure that those key partners who are the land managers are coming along. And that was the first thing our Carson District Ranger said to us was, what's your time frame? Because NEPA takes a long time. So we're not looking at something that's going to happen in the next year. We're looking at being able to justify the work due by having science behind it. I feel like one of the things when the watershed group goes after a project, we just go after a project because there's funding available. And we're very excited to have kind of a long-term blueprint for what are the higher priority projects, the lower bang for our buck, especially now as financial service. It's getting harder and harder to find funding.
Like you're gonna some abstract wall.
Any other questions?
Are there any questions from people on Zoom?
Okay, well, thank you all so much for coming. And please be in contact with me if you want to see some more details. Otherwise, we haven't really figured out exactly how we'll release the draft, but this is public funds and we want public input. That's the goal.
Thank you. Thank you all.